We have quorum. Do a bit of a roll call. Councillor Cartmel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Hamilton, are you online? No. Councillor Jans.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And I believe Mayor Sohi will be joining us shortly. Okay, but we're now on to item 3.2. Slash 3.3. I know they're being dealt with together. We also have a number of speakers with us today, but we're going to begin with a presentation from administration. So we'll turn it over to start.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Okay, so I am Pascala Dussard. I'm the branch manager for infrastructure planning and design. With me today are David Lazenby, our fire chief, Ken Snyder, the branch manager for planning and environment services, and Arjun Sharma, who's the branch manager for fleet and facility services. We also have numerous members of our teams that worked on the report from all 4 departments. Next slide, please. So in June 2024, a motion was passed by Council and a report was presented to Executive Committee in November 27, 2024. The comparative third-party cost analysis by Colliers was conducted on selected city and other municipal facilities, including new construction and the renewal of fire stations and rec centers. Next slide. We are here today to present the findings responding to the November 27 referral motion. And of note, item 3.3, capital project planning and design, processes and resources, was also referred back to administration and is the same report as was presented in November. And so the presentation this afternoon was focused on the new information presented in the cost drivers report. Next slide. And so to respond to the referral motion, a case study was completed by a third-party consultant with substantial experience designing fire stations in Edmonton and across Alberta. The team consisted of architects, engineers, energy modelers, and a cost consultant. The team completed a comparative analysis of 2 fire station design with similar functional programs. This involved evaluating a station design in accordance with the City of Edmonton's full range of bylaws, policies, standards, and other requirements, incorporating associated cost drivers, against a station designed to meet the minimum code requirement, with a design focus on minimizing capital costs and meeting basic functional program. For this case study, the designs created by the consultants were their interpretation of the city's bylaw, policies, and standards, as guided by administration subject matter experts, per our usual iterative process, ensuring best value while meeting city requirements. The results of the case study in terms of construction costs are aligned with the observation of administration while working with the policies on active capital projects. Administration selected fire stations as a proxy to represent city facilities. Fire stations are an asset that has a robust and well-established functional program, along with detailed standards and legislative requirements that guide the design and construction of the facilities. Fire stations are built more commonly and frequently than other facility types, resulting in more recent experiences to draw from. So on this slide, you see the basic and the full policy design. The basic design is typical of rural or smaller municipalities. It meets all code minimums, including reasonable efficiency. It is not optimized for reliability or ease of maintenance, and it is architecturally aligned with a more rural or industrial setting. The full city policy design meets or exceeds all codes and follows all policies and program requirements. It's optimized for ease and safety of maintenance. It is fully carbon neutral and more architecturally congruent with mixed residential, commercial, urban settings. City policies, standards, bylaws, and practices add cost to capital projects over and above a basic design that considers only building codes and legislative requirements. The case study showed that they can contribute to increased construction costs to facility projects of up to 50%. 4 of those city policy standards, bylaw, and practices are estimated to represent 98% of that cost difference between the station designs. That includes climate resilience policy, the fire rescue service delivery policy, the City of Edmonton facility construction standards, and the Edmonton Design Committee process. High operational costs are partially due to higher electrical and lower natural gas utility prices than anticipated, but are primarily due to life cycle replacement of many elements with higher capital and therefore renewal costs. These results challenge previous projections of financial payback, but the full policy design does result in significant improvement in energy consumption and elimination of greenhouse gas emissions. It's important to note that not all benefits are financial, and not all policies yield financial returns. Other tangible benefits of city policies, standards, bylaws, and practices include the integrated and efficient delivery of complex services, enhanced workplace safety and operational reliability, architecturally aligned with the surrounding urban environment, lower greenhouse gas emissions and positive environmental impact, and it's also important to note that benefits may extend beyond the terms of the cost analysis chosen, which was 25 years. Now for the result of the case study. As previously mentioned, direct construction costs are increased by the application of city requirements. Of note, the direct construction costs per square meters are aligned with other municipalities across Alberta. The cost difference is due to policy choices not associated to building for the City of Edmonton. This directly correlated to increased operational costs, including utilities, for an estimated 25 years. The full policy design consumes about half the energy of the basic design, and the full policy design mitigates all greenhouse gas emissions associated with the fire station's operations. Now, as mentioned, 4 policies, standards, bylaws, and practices represent 98% of the additional direct construction costs, and we will discuss each of these cost drivers in the next few slides. So first and foremost, the biggest cost driver is the climate resilience policy. And so we will review the history of the city's commitment to climate resilience for context. In 2018, the city hosted the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Cities Conference and created the Edmonton Declaration. Endorsed by more than 3,400 Northern American municipalities, the declaration committed Edmonton to action to meet the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency to recognize the need for urgent action to address climate change. In 2020, Council approved the city plan, which supports Edmonton's commitment to work towards limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius through the Greener as We Grow Big City Move. And finally, the current climate resilience policy was approved in 2021 with an ambitious standard for all new facilities achieving greenhouse gas emission neutrality. Council was informed at the time that capital costs would increase to meet the objectives of the policy. The associated sustainability requirements for city buildings are in alignment with these commitments and are necessary to meet the stated goals. One important concept that emerged from this policy and dictates the design of all new facilities is electrification. To achieve emissions neutral, all energy used on site must be green or offset by renewables. This means that natural gas is usually not used, as it is difficult to compensate for. Whereas the city purchases green electricity, which means that no emissions are counted when electrical power is used. The city report identified an expectation that project capital costs would increase, but that we expected operational cost savings over the life cycle of the asset. To date, we have not completed the construction of a facility under the requirements of the policy. The Blatchford Fire Station, which is under construction, will be the first. Sustainable and resilient design and construction is the most notable cost driver of revealed by the case study. Operational costs higher due to utilities and life cycle replacement. The significant variability of utility costs driven by external factors such as utility regulatory market and the carbon tax have been noted as an important variance factor, and operational costs not benefiting from utility cost savings compared to the baseline as natural gas is cheap. The next steps related to this particular cost driver is a regularly scheduled review of the policy. So the climate resilience policy is underway. There's a potential to review the prescriptive direction of emissions neutrality and the intent of the exception process. And the update policy is anticipated to be presented to Council in 2026. As for the City of Edmonton's facility construction standards and the fire rescue service delivery policy, these two drivers have overlapping influences. Some requirements demand increased facility size, which translate into increased capital costs. Also, there are additional systems such as lighting protection, in-floor heating, or controls that have added to cost. But these policies also support maintainability, policies and standards support maintainability, durability, security, for example, against vandalism, and operational efficiencies. The construction standards were established over time based on industry best practices, operational requirements to support efficiency and maintainability, and lessons learned from previous capital projects and overall maintenance experience. As next steps, administration will review aspects of these costs that have no long-term financial payback, operational benefits or safety implications, and refined our requirements. In particular, aspects that increase internal space requirements or direct costly construction elements without longevity benefits will be scrutinized. The Fire Rescue Services Facility Functional Program is currently under review, and the facility construction standards are regularly updated. The goal of the Edmonton Design Committee practices is to maintain and improve the quality of the city's urban design and level of architecture. It primarily affects building exterior envelope and is the result of an iterative process between city architecture and project architects to achieve a best value result that will be acceptable to the Edmonton Design Committee and the community. The next steps related to this process is the ongoing review of the Edmonton Design Committee process and bylaw, which could include the clarifying its mandate, applicability, and jurisdiction. For example, geographic limits, public visibility, or advisory role. Outside of the Edmonton Design Committee process, administration will consider a standardized palette of materials and forms for certain archetypes to achieve cost efficiency. And so, as an overall summary, the findings of the case study align with the findings of the initial cost drivers comparative analysis completed by Colliers for the original report. Collier's study found that program and design scope, sustainability and climate resilience goals, complexities of policies, bylaws, standards, and regulatory responses, business partner involvement, and timing and market escalation were the main cost drivers of the city's capital infrastructure projects. The case study focused on developing on the policies, bylaws, standards, and practices that influence our costs on our infrastructure. The results show that the implementation of the city's policies, standards, and bylaws delivers notable energy efficiency, sustainability, reliability, maintainability, aesthetics, and service delivery benefits. It also incurs higher capital investment and operational expenses over its life cycle. Finally, through this comparative analysis work, administration has identified a number of lessons learned that are being applied to current and future projects. They include the refinement to the program. So the program for a facility informs its design and building size. As administration undertakes developing new facilities, standard program requirements are being reviewed and opportunities for efficiencies are being identified. For example, the program for the Walker Fire Station has been reduced from the standard 3-bay to 2 bays. This decision was based on identifying the station's geographic location did not require 3 bays and that the service levels could be maintained with a 2-bay station. Adjustments to design. Building designs are being simplified to allow for the use of local sourced, robust, and durable materials that align with the look and feel of the surrounding environment. And finally, we are adjusting to the impacts of sustainability. The capital planning will be adjusted to include a more accurate understanding of sustainability impact and will improve cost accuracy. As sustainability knowledge and technology improves, the need for system redundancy could be minimized, which may reduce this cost driver over time as well. And so with that, we will leave room for speakers and we will be happy to answer questions following that.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We will call the names of the speakers, and please come to the front if you're here. Lindsay Butterfield, Build Edmonton Metro, speaker number 1. Susan Keating, Build Edmonton Metro in person or remote now?
Yes, I'm remote. Thank you.
Thank you. Javid Komar, Energy Transition and Climate Resilient Committee, joining remote.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
David Dodge, joining remote.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Here.
Peter Emerongen, joining remotely. Peter?
Peter is here.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Mike Melrose, Alberta Eco Trust Foundation, joining remotely.
I'm here.
Shafraz Kaba, joining remotely. Shafraz. And Jim Sendercock, joining in person. Okay. All right, we will start with the speaker, Lindsay Butterfield. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. Good morning, good afternoon, members of the Infrastructure Committee. Congratulations on your inaugural meeting today. My name is Lindsay Butterfield, and I'm Vice President of Government Relations and Policy for Build Edmonton Metro. Our association represents over 500 member companies in the construction and land development industry. Through Build, we seek to ensure that the Edmonton region is a place where people choose to live, invest, and thrive. I was able to speak to committee when the report that was referenced by administration in November last year took place, and I would like to commend Executive Committee for providing the motion that led to this report today. In particular, we appreciate that fire halls were chosen to represent the case study examining the cost of policy, since our members pay off-site levies to support the capital funding of those buildings. As somebody who was involved in the development of the off-site levy bylaw, it has always been clear that industry is not against paying charges for fire halls, which provide a critical service protecting life and property, in addition to reducing construction requirements when fire response is readily available. However, industry has been challenged by the requirements that are over and above what is needed for an effective facility, caused by policies that are specific to the City of Edmonton. Today's report does an excellent job of conveying the cost differential that policy creates and opens the door for Infrastructure Committee and City Council to recognize that there are options available to reduce costs in the capital budget by addressing the policy pileup. This opportunity is made greater by having access to real dollars and cents in terms of numbers, rather than using assumptions, so that all facets of the common good can be considered in policy decisions. While Council is able and should consider a wide range of factors when adopting policy, including social, environmental, capital costs, etc., making decisions for the greater good also needs to include the financial well-being of the community. Allowing overbuilt infrastructure to be provided through policy direction is not unlike somebody buying a luxury vehicle that they can't afford the insurance or maintenance costs for. And now that we've seen the numbers, we're able to more accurately weigh how choices impact Edmontonians today and in the long run. We know that there are not yet specific next steps identified, although in discussion and in the presentation today, administration indicated that there was conversation about lessons being learned, and through digesting the information provided by the consultant, there should be some great steps forward. We look forward to those lessons learned being turned into process changes and policy reviews. At a minimum, Build asks that future policy decisions consider cost impacts as part of the decision-making process, which is often absent from policy adoption under the existing processes. Overall, this report provides the answers that were lacking in November, so thank you. We're pleased to see that rather than assumptions, the numbers are able to tell the story. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you so much for waiting and for joining us. Next, we will go to Susan Keating from Build Edmonton Metro.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, Infrastructure Committee and members of City Council. My name is Susan Keating, and I am the Vice President at Melcor, as well as a volunteer on a number of working groups and committees for Build Edmonton Metro. In particular, I volunteer on those committees dealing with infrastructure. I was able to attend and speak at executive committee in November to the initial report, and I'm very pleased to see that the motion that was made at that time has resulted in such a robust report for city administration and committee and council to consider. The report provided by the consultant is incredibly detailed. I'm not looking to get into the weeds today on any specific numbers or details of the design elements. Instead, I want to just simply speak about the philosophy of Edmonton's policy approach. Our membership has raised the issue of the incremental and cumulative cost of policy for years and has been asking council to address it. This case study, while it can't necessarily be generalized to every single project in the city, offers a clear assessment of the cost of policy and quantifies the cost impact for this one capital project. Build notes that there are many costs listed that provide safety, security, and levels of comfort or practicality. We are not here to argue for the lowest common denominator and are not trying to reduce project outcomes to their most minimal form. And we agree that many of the costs of applying Edmonton's policies are practical and understandable. However, the magnitude of the difference in costs from the base case to the full policy case is really worth further consideration. The city still does not require a financial evaluation section for policy reports, and today's discussion is a clear demonstration that omitting financial impacts is a gap that needs to be closed. At Melcor, when we bring forward a project, it's important to understand and convey the who, the what, the where, the why, but we don't proceed with anything without proving that it makes sense financially. And if it doesn't make sense financially, there needs to be a clear proposition to demonstrate a need to proceed, despite the financial piece. It's a true pro and con reconciliation. While the city has a role in looking out for the greater good of Edmontonians in a number of facets that may not always be considered in the private sector, that doesn't mean that council should remain uninformed on the financial well-being of the community, both in the short and long term. Knowing the effect that a policy has on the city's financial position before proceeding with any great idea and some form of cost-benefit analysis with real numbers is critical. I want to reiterate that this does not mean that council should always choose the cheapest option, but decision makers should have full transparency of the cost impacts available when making choices that impact Edmontonians. Council is elected to set the priorities and the budget for our city, and council also has the option to weigh trade-offs. However, the status quo is that costs are not considered when policy is created, and this missing information has impacts for administration, our capital and operating budgets, and of course for taxpayers, which all trickle down to council's accountability. In our discussion with city administration, the day this report was published, they were clear that they have already learned a great deal from this report and are considering changes and next steps, which may require some time to develop. This is a great outcome. However, a great first step would be to change the policy process to ensure that council understands the full impact of approving a policy, including financial impacts, and can make decisions about trade-offs with clarity. I want to thank you for directing this report to be brought forward today and look forward to ongoing discussions to streamline our city's capital costs to ensure Edmonton provides excellent service in a cost-efficient manner. Happy to answer any questions of the committee. Thanks.
Thank you so much for waiting and joining us. Next, we will go to Jacob Comar.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Awesome. Hello, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Jacob, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Energy Transition and Climate Resilience Committee. Our committee is very concerned about this report for a lot of reasons, which I will try to detail today, but I want to make clear that I'm not trying to criticize anyone with some of these comments, but this is such a critical topic. We have to get the facts out there. And I should mention that I'm not here just as the co-chair of our committee. I'm an expert in this field. Net zero and high performance buildings is what I do for a living. I've specialized in this field for 15 years. I've helped design over 20 net zero buildings, including the Windermere Fire Station, and I'm helping on the next two as well. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying this to make clear that this is what I know the most about. And there are many issues with this report. The first major one is the fact that this study is looking into city policies on fire station in the first place. I've spoken with city staff. Fire halls are the most energy intensive building that we operate as a city. They're worse than rec centers. And that's because of the app bay. We open the doors all the time. Fire trucks come out, they go from a -20 call and we have to reheat 50 tons of truck. That is very energy intensive. But fire stations represent only 3% of the city's building stock of over 900 buildings. In our opinion, judging any policy by studying the most extreme outlier is fundamentally flawed. It's literally like deciding on a home retrofit upgrade by studying 2 rec centers. It's almost in the same scale of difference. And I won't speak for my whole industry, but I've spoken to many colleagues in this field who have worked on high performance buildings, and we find the conclusions of this study to be downright shocking. If this theoretical building was built, it would be the most expensive and first near net zero building that has higher operating costs, higher maintenance costs, and higher replacement costs. The first. Why would we ever do this if it wasn't better on all fronts? As I mentioned, I've worked on over 20 myself, and they are all cheaper to operate, cheaper to maintain, last longer, are more comfortable, and have smaller replacement costs. And as an industry, we generally agree that the cost premium to go to net zero should be in the 4 to 5% range, never 28%. Nobody would build these buildings if that were the case. We have many examples of buildings that are even larger than these fire stations where the cost premium was less than $1 million. How we got to $4 million just on sustainability is beyond us. So where is that disconnect? First, the study compares a basic fossil fuel heated building with rooftop units, the cheapest, least efficient, least comfortable piece of equipment that you could install, to a fully electrified building with many upgrades, which doesn't make this an apples to apples comparison. To make it worse, the electrified building uses an electricity rate of 23 cents per kilowatt hour because of our city policy to purchase green recs, which is more than double of what electricity costs today. Electricity costs are actually quite low. So a completely sensible decision to electrify a building is being penalized by another city policy. And just so you know, if you remove that policy, your operating costs would drop in half immediately, half. How is that not mentioned in the study? And if you did want to keep the policy, if we see value in it, then why wouldn't we install enough solar PV panels to offset all that energy usage instead of only 24%? That's the whole point of PV. And so that $47,000 cost premium could have been reduced either to $23,000 by removing the policy or less than $10,000 costs. So there's some fundamental issues. Also, we have huge problems. The walls, the roofs, the doors are way overspecified. They're way beyond what we design net zero buildings at. And they're basically adding, we've identified basically $2 million of envelope upgrades that probably didn't need to happen. The mechanical systems are also overcomplicated and duplicate, and like the VRF systems, the variable refrigerant volume systems specified, are being phased out because of flammable refrigerants. There was $400,000 for upgraded lights that didn't need to be there. $400,000 for bifold doors, which would make zero difference on energy. They added a requirement for a structurally supported slab because of the geothermal system. I've designed over 100 of those systems. I've never done that. That's not a requirement. We're not even under the building. Why is that $300,000 added? The other issue is that they are trying to meet the thermal energy demand requirements as per the policy. This requirement is basically meant to ensure we don't build crappy envelopes. On the Windermere, we were exempt from that policy because we know that it would have been too expensive to meet it. So why are we doing that in this one? So there's fundamental issues which we've detailed in a report. Fundamentally, our industry knows that the cost premium should be 4 to 5%, and these systems are always cheaper to maintain, operate, and last longer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Comer, and thank you so much for waiting as well. And next, we will go to David Dodge.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors, and I'm really happy to be here. I must confess, when I first read the report, I found it exceptionally discouraging. But, if I put my positive hat on, I think, well, this does identify a lot of flaws in our approach and provides us with lots of opportunities on how we can improve. And so we've got some work to do. That's my conclusion from this. I think, we should also focus on learning from other experiences. So a report that we need is how to do this cost effectively, not how expensive it is to do it. And so I think that should be our next focus, is to take the learnings, take all that enthusiasm I heard this morning in these meetings for improving processes and finding efficiencies and work on that. The climate emergency is with us, and there are a dozen city policies and reports acknowledge us and pledge to build a more sustainable future, which is something we need to do. And so what I'm here to share with you is just a couple of examples, hopefully to get your spirits up a little bit. What I've found in the marketplace in doing more than 400 stories over the last decade from across Canada are some incredibly creative, innovative, and successful people doing projects just like these. And I've not found them to be too expensive. And this is something we need to learn how to do. Building net zero or near net zero buildings is going to be code in some day in the not too distant future. And this should be one of the best forward-looking investments that we can make, even in 2025. So I have one message for you today, and I think it follows on the spirit of this morning's meeting, and that is perfection is the enemy of the good. In fact, perfection can be paralyzing. We need to inspire innovation instead of facilitating cutting corners. And I think that's kind of what I was hearing this morning. So here's a few examples of what I've found in the real world that I find quite inspiring in this particular area. The Salvation Army was set to build a code-built 175-unit complex in North Edmonton. And at the last minute, the architect reissued RFPs for a net zero ready building, something she was told that was unaffordable to do for the Salvation Army. She just couldn't award the code-built contract. She had to do this. The quotes came in at less than 2% above the code build quotes. The project came in at 4% above code, and the geothermal heated solar powered complex is projected to save the Salvation Army $6 million over the next 20 years. Another example I'll use that, and this is along the theme of innovation and how we refine our processes. Landmark Homes has been building net zero homes in Edmonton for 16 years, and they are powerfully motivated by economics because they have to sell homes in the marketplace, and they use spreadsheets to find those best trade-offs in design and construction, and have been very successful. Their homes today are not much more expensive than their competitors, and they're solar powered, net zero, and I just ran the numbers on a sample home in Blatchford, and fully capable of providing zero utility cost today in Blatchford. One more story I did was on Scott Subaru. Here's a private company who, again, took one of the hardest case scenarios and built the first passive house first passive house car dealership in North America a number of years ago, which seems like a crazy thing to do. And it was so successful for them that it has led to innovation in everything else the company's investing in, from multifamily to their new facilities. Now, they're not building passive house in everything these days, but a lot of what they learned in those is finding its way into the new projects. Again, we have the Mosaic Center in Edmonton, the first commercial net zero commercial building was built using IPD, which was discussed this morning, which is very important. And I think it came in under budget. I think, this along the perfection is the enemy of the good theme is we have to be careful about absolutism and allow ourselves to make those creative trade-offs. Maybe it's not a big sweeping roof in a fire hall. Maybe it's the climate goals that are important for now. Maybe if we challenge the architects, they can find better ways of doing nice looking buildings that don't cost as much. And I think what I heard from the folks making the presentation is there is an interest in poking at all these things and finding the solutions. But I especially encourage us to look at other examples out there and find much better ways of doing net zero facilities in Edmonton, because they exist. And I think we've got some work to do on that, but I think it can be done. And I think the expertise is out there.
Thank you so much for joining us, David, and thank you so much for waiting as well. Next, we will go to Peter Amrongen.
Thanks very much. Your Worship. I think this, the problem here is that the report is flawed, as others have said. It's a big mistake to extrapolate on the basis of one building, and particularly one building done by a rookie team that had never done net zero before. They were bound to make mistakes and make choices that were more expensive than they needed to be. There is a learning curve. I have been involved in building a number of net zero buildings in the city here. The first was the Riverdale Net Zero House that we did in 2007, and frankly, we threw everything at it and built a bit of a science project, but we learned from that. The next project was much simpler, and by the third one, we had a formula that we were repeating and able to build net zero for about 5% more than traditional. So it's really important to do that, and Jacob and others and David have given other examples, but our experience with the townhouse project that we did and church in North Glenora was about the same, about 5%. And down the street, there's a passive house apartment building that was about 15, but that again was a rookie team. And there are lots of other examples from around the project. There's an outfit in BC building large multifamilies at passive house levels below market price, and they're doing it by because they've integrated integrated project development into their process. They're involving the consultants, the contractors, right down to the workers, and fine-tuning the design so that energy efficiency is in the DNA of the project from the beginning. And that's such a huge contrast to this particular fire station. So it is possible to do this. Excuse me. And the presentations this morning that talked about alternate procurement were really inspiring and completely consistent with our experience. When you get everybody at the table and work this stuff out ahead, the cost is the savings are huge, and the efficiencies and the project improve immensely. I mean, it would be a total breach of faith with our younger Edmontonians to back away from net zero at this point when the climate change is not going away. It's obvious from the fires, the heat in Eastern Canada, that it's getting worse fast. It would be just terrible to abandon this because of essentially one project that failed to that was a learning experience. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us and waiting. Next, we will go to Mike Melross from Alberta Eco Trust Foundation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members of Infrastructure Committee. I'm Mike Melross, Vice President of Alberta Eco Trust Foundation. Alberta Eco Trust is a charity that has operated in Alberta for well over 30 years, and we are a founding member of the Low Carbon Cities Canada Network, a national initiative accelerating equitable climate solutions in cities. As an LC3 member, we received an endowment from the Government of Canada to establish the Climate Innovation Fund. The fund provides a suite of programs to complement and advance the climate leadership work undertaken by the cities of Calgary and Edmonton. Today, I would like to advocate for your continued support of the Climate Resilience Policy C627A, which we see as a cornerstone of Edmonton's journey towards a sustainable future, not just for the corporation, but for the whole community. The direct impacts of this policy on municipal buildings are critical for achieving the ambitious 2040 corporate carbon neutrality target, while contributing to the broader 2050 community goals. But the policy does so much more. While the analysis presented in the report highlights potential cost premiums at the building level, it's crucial to view any increased costs not as specific expenses, but rather as strategic community investments. Because the climate resilience policy does not just influence civic accommodations, it also leads the transformation of our construction and infrastructure sectors. By setting high standards for its own projects, the city stimulates innovation, economic development, and drives the adoption of sustainable building practices. And this leadership ultimately leads to cost reductions for all future projects, both public and private, shaping a more sustainable economy here in Edmonton. One of the most important messages I would like to leave the committee with is this: the city's commitment to high standards is a critical catalyst for market transformation, normalizing net zero design and fostering a future skills local workforce and robust supply chain. The city is frequently advocating for industry and individuals to take action to reduce their carbon footprint. But how does that message land if the city does not also take action? And the public mandate for climate action remains really robust, with 64% of Edmontonians believing the city should increase or maintain its efforts to address climate change. And I don't envy City Council's financial situation. I know you have a lot of hard decisions before you. But before making any final decision on this one, I think a more comprehensive look is warranted, including understanding the policy term better in terms of its overall public good impact. And I think I've heard that term actually used a couple times now. Beyond the public or the building level financials, there's more to it than that. And in closing, we support more discussion that would include the administration's additional work that is planned, including the sustainable return on investment analysis that's indicated in Appendix 5 of the report, to ensure that these benefits are presented holistically, and to look at a broader body of work. As some speakers have already indicated, many real-world case studies would not align with the cost premium suggested in this report. Also, a broad interest holder engagement in this process is encouraged to comprehensively inform any of the final recommendations. And we'd certainly be happy to be part of those conversations. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much for joining us and waiting. I'll check again if Shafraz Kaba joining us remotely.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Sohi, for the opportunity and councillors to speak to this item. I'm Shafraz Kaba. I have been an architect for 25 years, practicing in sustainable building. I'm also a founding member of both the Edmonton Design Committee, the original one where Mayor Mendel said we will not tolerate any more crap architecture, as well as the Edmonton Energy Transition and Climate Resiliency Committee. Almost as soon as Edmonton created the Edmonton Declaration in response to the climate emergency, I'd like to point out the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada actually created a resolution for the urgent and sustained action on climate and basically ecological health. So I, as an architect, am mandated, if not just governed by doing the best for the public good. So I'm here to sort of reinforce that message that all of these policies, all of these ideas are meant to act on that public good. And what we're trying to do is multi-solve several issues and crises going on. Having read the report, like many others, I was hoping for the opportunity for the city to improve on this by looking at what they can do better. And one of the things I found out that this report does not do is basically talk about tunneling through the cost barrier, an idea that Paul Hawken mentioned about how sustainable buildings can be cost effective. So instead of thinking, oh, we have to add more insulation and we have to add geo exchange and we have to add solar, it's really about looking at all of those items and how they actually reduce the amount of energy that they will consume and reduce the mechanical systems and electrical systems to be able to trade off the budget, to be able to make work a sustainable or a zero carbon building. In my 25 years of experience, I worked on some of the buildings already mentioned, like the Mosaic Center, the very first net zero energy attempt at a commercial mixed-use office building. We built that under budget with full solar and geo-exchange systems. We also learned a lot of lessons in that it takes over a year to get a building to operate efficiently and as designed, as the commissioning of that building is instrumental in having it work properly. But the report doesn't really speak to some of the lessons learned, nor provides a jurisdictional scan of some of the net zero or zero carbon buildings already out there. The Canada Green Building Council has reams of data on how perhaps the first cost is slightly more expensive, as mentioned before, 5 to perhaps up to 10% more, but almost all come back to be operationally more cost effective and cheaper to run. So we, as an industry, are learning all of these lessons in the last little while to do that. And what we're trying to do is create or prevent stranded assets from happening in buildings. We know that natural gas will not be cheap forever. In fact, we know we have to transition to electrified buildings. And with that idea in mind, we have to recognize that some of those systems will need to be retrofitted. So it's best to do them at the very beginning when we build buildings for the first time, or for that initial cost. And then we see how the net present value will yield hopefully a return on that investment. In fact, we've seen that over and over again. The last project that I've seen our team work on in Edmonton, that is a City of Edmonton project that I'm proud of, is the Edmonton Expo retrofit that has one of the largest solar rooftops, that is striving for that 2040 carbon neutrality, is striving to achieve all of those climate goals, is looking to be a signature building, and is a really good example. In fact, this week, there was a forum on how that integrated project delivery team delivered that project on time, on budget, with more than the city asked for at the beginning. So thank you for the opportunity today. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for joining us as well as waiting. Next, we will go to Jim Sendercock. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and councillors for letting me speak today. I'm here today to recommend that this committee and that council focus in the future on the lessons learned from this report, but not modify C627A as a result of this particular study. I'd like to start by applauding council for examining the impacts of specific policies in the face of the climate emergency. I think every ton of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas that's emitted to the atmosphere matters, and we want to try to get the best bang for our buck, get the most greenhouse gas emissions reductions as possible for the least amount of money. I also want to applaud administration for their work on this particular project, and to their credit, this, as has already been mentioned, was a specifically challenging type of building to work on, to try to create a net zero or low carbon solution. I did have a chance to actually go to that event yesterday, that forum that Shafraz mentioned, about the IPD being done on the Expo Center. And I'd just like to point out just how much the administration has been working to take on innovative processes and innovative things for the City of Edmonton. And I think citizens might not realize just how much work they're doing and how good that work has been. And I believe that project is both a greener building, it's under budget, and it's on time. However, as mentioned, this particular study and this particular plan did have some challenges. The results don't align with what we've seen for our buildings in Edmonton and in Alberta in terms of their capital premium, which is usually, as mentioned, 5 to 10%. This one was closer to 28% for just the one component of the C627A component. And that should just be signaling that it's early days for the administration on doing this work. And as much as IPD, it's early days for IPD. The IPD's been around for decades. Net zero buildings have been around for decades, but the city is now able to engage in some new processes, and of course there's going to be some learnings along the way. And the other thing is that we've also been seeing lower operational costs with most buildings, and that should be that have been done and are actually operational, and that should be a signal again that there's some refinements to be done and optimizations to be done on this particular study. One thing I would point out is this is not a particularly representative building. 35 out of about 900 buildings that the corporation is either owning or operating is not really representative, and it's an incredibly challenging building type. So there's not a lot of lessons learned from this building type to others. And so that's important because we want the city's engineering studies to be meaningful to the vast majority of the square feet that the city is responsible for, but also inform what can happen with building owners of other types within the community. In terms of recommendations, I would again say that the best thing that could happen would be the city council and administration receive reports about other more representative building types before any changes are made to C627A. And another one is to not decarbonize at any cost. There are actually, considerations about what's the way to get our best carbon bang for our buck. And I think this particular building type is astronomically more difficult to do a carbon improvement upon than most of what the city is owning or operating. And so focusing in on the major type of building that you guys have would be a better approach. I think the sustainable return on investment is a great idea, and I'd like to see that implemented, of course. And there are provisions for exceptionally hard to decarbonize buildings, and I think that procedure already exists and should be utilized. Considering not just the cost of C627 compliance versus minimum code is important because it's going to be really expensive in the future to retrofit buildings that were built to minimum code. So sometimes doing something today instead of tomorrow, an ounce of prevention, if you will, could be quite valuable. This won't come as a surprise to anybody that lives in Edmonton or anybody on council, but Edmonton, it's cold. And the answer is actually better buildings, not code minimum buildings. And so there's been a lot of successes with net zero buildings and high performance buildings, and I think we can take some great lessons learned from that. And I'd suggest that maybe the council could be engaging with expert groups like Edmonton's ETCRC a little bit earlier in their design process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for waiting and joining us. And that concludes the presentations from folks registered to speak. Now we'll go to questions from committee members and rest of council colleagues. Councillor Cartmel.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone for your attendance and submissions today. I'm going to go to Mr. Sandercock,
Yes.
mostly because I can see you and it's hard to see the other people. So you just said that this is maybe not the best building to test as an exemplar. What would be a more representative building in your view?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I was trying to find, and I didn't find it easily, what is the gross floor area? What's the largest representative building type for the gross floor area that the city of Edmonton actually does operate? And I'm not clear on what that is, but at 35 out of about 900 buildings, I don't think it's the fire hall. And then it gets into those other questions as well. Yeah. It might be office space. I'm not absolutely certain, but there can probably be a fair bit of work that could be done on buildings that are already pre-existing to make them more carbon, have a lower carbon footprint versus, say, for something like fire hall.
Yeah. Okay. So, and taking your point that perhaps the comparative baseline to a code minimum building isn't the best baseline. What I'm also hearing being said repeatedly is $21 million for the quote unquote net zero fire hall is too high, that it could be done for much less money. Am I hearing that correctly?
I believe that's what almost every panelist has said, yeah.
Right. Did you want to, I don't want to put you on the spot specifically, right. But how much less than $21 million?
I'd have to refer that probably to one of the folks that has been actually designing and ending up building these
Sure.
facilities. So I'd recommend Peter Amarongan and Jacob Komar would be the experts for that.
So, and I want to hasten to add that not all of that delta is climate change. There's operational, there's other policies that are in play here that I want to ask admin about. So I guess then to Ms. Butterfield, my understanding is that we have an offsite levy program that says developers in new neighborhoods pay for the fire hall.
Correct, for the proportion of the benefiting area that is undeveloped.
And the cost for a fire hall that's being used to calculate those offsites is $26 million.
Yes.
And you've just heard that 21 of that might be the building, but that should be less.
It's great information.
What do you think industry's response might be to the $26 million bill versus what we've just heard today?
I think anything that can reduce those development charges trickles down to home buyers, which is really the end goal.
So this report effectively said, all right, design a base building and then design all the adds. And again, we've heard maybe the absolute minimum baseline isn't the right base building, but nevertheless, here we are with this analysis. And the outcome has been that we've had a number of people that with expertise come here and say that the analysis is flawed. We can do it for a lot less. What does that tell you about having a process that actually forces a transparent calculation of the additive costs per lens, per perspective, per policy?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think we've heard from, again, a number of speakers that this morning's discussion was really instructive in terms of what could be for those processes, and that's a reason to be optimistic. To be sure, the people who are in those meetings who oversee the levies are not necessarily designers of net zero buildings, so it's really
Sure.
difficult for them.
So if there was a process that said, okay, so the next fire hall, we want to know what a base building costs. Once again, perhaps redefining what base is. And we want a competitive process to tell us what it would cost to apply each policy to that base building. Would industry be a little more accepting of the bottom line, if the bottom number, if that was the process?
I think that opportunity would be welcome. I think that would also offer more transparency for City Council, for administration as well.
And taxpayers.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to all the speakers for being with us today. I'll go to Speaker David Dodge to start. I appreciate some of the real-world examples that you shared. And you spoke about the importance of being able to find the best trade-offs in design and construction. I guess when I'm looking at the current policy and procedures, do you feel that the way things are outlined right now, it allows for those kinds of creative trade-offs to be made?
Well, I certainly heard enthusiasm for that this morning, but we certainly don't see it in the outcome of this report. The report seems like an absolutist kind of analysis of the worst case scenario and not putting us on the pathway to building the most effective building. I'm going to give you the example. So I said perfection is the enemy of the good. And I really mean that. I just did an interview with Michael Liebrecht, who's the founder of Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And this is an energy example, but I think it applies to what we're talking about here in buildings. He interviewed Anders Lindberg, who's the CEO of a Finnish company that builds very interesting gas engine turbines that could reduce the cost of providing power to the grid and allow us to get up to about 95% renewable energy using a process called flexible gas. And so what's interesting is you won't hear the renewable energy advocates advocating for this, and you won't hear the conventional energy people advocating for this either. What it does essentially is it applies creativity to a problem. And the problem is, how do we provide grid stability services to create a much cheaper renewable energy-based grid? And so what he's found is for as little as 4% of the whole output of the grid, if it came from these flexible gas plants, we could manage very, very high percentages of renewable energy. And so we're 95% to the goal. If you then say, oh, we could also run those gas plants on biogas or some other fuel that's non-carbon emitting, you get all the way there. So I think if we take that analogy and we apply it to buildings, what I heard from Jacob Komar and what I heard from Shafraz and from some of the other folks is that we already know how to do this. So how do we get to the point of applying the right trade-offs to make the right decisions to do this more affordably? You know, I think it's astounding. 21 million versus 13 is astounding. And I don't think that's what they found in Canmore when they built their fire hall. They did it a lot more affordably.
Right. And I guess what I'm trying to determine and what I'm grappling with is when I look at the current policy, my read is that it does allow for that degree of sort of creativity and those types of conversations to be had. But then there's a gap between that reality and then what we're seeing in the analysis in front of us. And I'm just trying to bridge that. But again, from your perspective, as the policy is currently in place, it does allow for that type of creativity, correct?
That's what I hear, and I certainly heard enthusiasm for that from the administration this morning and from councillors. And so, yeah, redo the report, but do it with a view to finding the solutions instead of finding the problems.
Right, and maybe I'll just go to Speaker Shafraz Kaba as well. Is that your read on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the concept of tunneling through the cost barrier was what I was trying to get at, is like we in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry need to work together to find those innovative solutions. That's exactly what we did at Edmonton Expo Center to get that project under budget, and with all that solar, with the innovation, with working directly with the trade team to help us make the cost-effective solutions. The boots on the ground, the people actually constructing the building, helped us make the right cost-effective choices through an integrated project delivery process.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. I'm going to jump to Speaker Mike Melross as well. You were speaking about sort of next steps, and you mentioned you'd support more discussion around lessons learned from administration, but you also mentioned the sustainable return on investment analysis. Can you just speak to that particular piece and why that would be important going forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can actually answer that one. So the sustainable return on investment is a great tool to bring in community benefits as well as economic benefits that might not be within the business case at the site level. So it's what are you catalyzing out there in the community in terms of those benefits? In fact, the city of Edmonton has experience with doing this work. My memory might be a little bit off, but 2011, 2012, when I worked at the city of Edmonton, we engaged a firm, HDR, to look at the lead policy at the time of the city of Edmonton and really outline those benefits and costs that might be outside of the typical business case, and the benefits that are accrued as a result of those more community benefits are just huge. They're substantial, and they are real benefits, including economic activity.
Thank you so much. Councillor Jans, you're next.
Thank you. So if I can maybe go to Speaker Shafraz or Speaker Melross, the phrase I just keep hearing over and over is tight ends, loose means. Is that sort of, if I had to sum this whole discussion up, is that kind of what I hear from you? You still want the objectives, you still want the goals, you still want the policy, but we need a little more flexibility in the realization of it?
Yes. In essence, the creativity comes from collaboration and opening up the team to think through those solutions. My experience, frankly, working on City of Edmonton projects has been a significant amount of project management that constrains some of that, or adding of redundancy to systems where we would question, hey, do you actually need a natural gas boiler in addition to all of the heat pumps here? Like, the heat pumps are redundant amongst themselves. Like, we question a lot of these things, but sometimes the management of this process or the terms of reference get a little too prescribed. So we would welcome some flexibility in solving problems.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe to either guest Komar or guest Dodge, I guess when I read this report, I was a little frustrated because it felt like we were kind of missing the forest for the trees here. That the question isn't how should we be building the fire hall, it's why are we building fire halls all the way out over the Henday towards the airport? Why are we continuing urban sprawl? It's not necessarily the fire halls that are the problem here. It's our growth pattern. And I guess I just wanted your response there that this is an inaugural meeting of our infrastructure committee, and it feels like I don't know, this is the unfiltered cigarettes conversation, you know?
Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and the fact is that even a net zero building is just not actually increasing energy. We're not actually reducing our GHGs, and the fact is, we know that our city can't afford additional urban sprawl, and which causes more of these buildings to be built and more costs. And of course, those costs get passed on to taxpayers. It's really just a massive wealth transfer from taxpayers to developers. And so obviously we need to change that whole conversation and start densifying for our own well-being. And it's fundamentally just like we know if we keep building fossil fuel infrastructure that are stranded assets, we're going to have to pay for it after.
So if we were to move a follow-up motion to study something, like I feel like over and over and over, we have all of these reports. City of Ottawa, sprawl costs taxpayer, infill saves taxpayers. Edmonton, sprawl costs taxpayers, infill saves Edmonton money, infill generates revenue, over and over and over. And yet here we are at the infrastructure committee, not actually talking about the thousands of kilometers of roads or pipes or infrastructure. We're talking about a leaky fire hall. And I guess, what do you think the question is we should be asking, or how do we, and I'll open this up to David as well, but you know, you've been here for a while. Like, is it more information we need? Is it something else? Like, it sounds like it's an operational concern, not a policy concern that we need to talk to our staff about.
Well, I think the message I would send is like, we have too many studies and too many, if we just put the money that we put into the study into this fire hall, it'd be damn near net zero already. Like, we've committed to climate emergency. We've committed to these energy targets. We know where energy codes are going. We know where the world is going. The world is very rapidly transitioning to electric systems. Why are we even questioning this? Yes, we can look at certain policies and say, do we need a redundant mechanical system? That would save us tons of money. Do we need to build the biggest, grandest fire station or be more modest? Yes, those are excellent questions to bring down costs. But we need to stop questioning, you know, whether these policies need to happen. And of course, look at the larger trends of why are we spending this money in the first place and why infill is so much better for the city in so many ways.
So I guess, would you rather have a net zero building south of 41st Avenue Southwest, or would you rather have a traditional building north of the Henday?
I mean, I want to keep the ones we already have and then upgrade those and not build another building that is, you know, at best net zero, but still costing us money for the life of the building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. I'll go next. I'll start with Speaker Komar. You mentioned something in your presentation that we're buying electricity at a much higher cost. Can you elaborate on that?
Correct. And I think this was mentioned in the presentation, and maybe somebody at the city can expand exactly how this works, because I'm not sure if they're RECs or something. But essentially, we purchase green electricity from the, you know, whether it's a renewable energy certificate, to say that our electricity is green, it's emissions neutral, it's solar panels or wind. And so that costs extra. A current all-in rate for electricity right now is about 11 cents a kilowatt hour. Mm-hmm. We're paying 23 cents a kilowatt hour for that privilege of claiming it as net zero. So technically,
you think that is, I'll ask that question to Ms. Nisho. You think that additional cost, which is almost double, is factored into the higher operating cost in this hypothetical study?
That is the reason why the cost is so high. They're claiming a $47,000 cost premium because it's all electricity. But again, if you remove that policy alone, the cost would go down to 23,000.
Got
And
it.
if you actually just added solar PV, which obviously offsets all your electricity costs, then you could get to probably 5 or 10,000. Like why that wasn't added into this analysis is beyond me.
Got it. And you said you were involved in the Windermere fire station?
Yes.
I don't know, but was that, how much addition do you know? The climate resilient, with the
I'll say it
policy
this
was
way.
applicable. Was this policy applied there?
Yes, it was. So a lot of things, I was brought in a little bit later into that project, but there's a lot of lessons learned. I think fundamentally, absolutely, we should be reviewing policies. Like there's redundant mechanical systems, there's backup systems to backup systems. Maybe sometimes for like a life safety building, it's required. That's not my job to say. But I know, having built these buildings, that if you actually look, the main energy drivers for getting a building to net zero is the geosystem, which at Windermere costs $240,000. For this building was $320,000. And the solar system, which at Windermere was $350,000. And here it was a smaller system, but it was $160,000. If you account for the small envelope upgrades that we actually need, not that they specified, you should be in the realm of $700,000 to $1 million for the actual energy upgrades. Everything else is a comfort upgrade. Let's not claim that the in-floor heating is a sustainability policy upgrade. When you're comparing that to a rooftop unit, that's not apples to apples. You chose that because of comfort, right? And Windermere, for example, had redundant systems. It had heat pumps and in-floor heating in the same spaces. In my energy model, I had to turn one of them off because they could both do the job. So maybe we should look at those costs.
And to Speaker Senator Cock, you said we should not be striving for decarbonization at any cost, right? That's right. So does this policy C627A is too prescriptive that if that it strives to decarbonize at any cost?
No, I think that 627A actually has procedures that follow it, that make recommendations that if something cannot be reasonably decarbonized due to cost, that there are ways to go up the chain to say maybe this particular building or this particular incident should not be taken all the way to, say, for example, net zero. And so I think there is flexibility in the system already through the policies and procedures. And I think we just could have a bit more of a look, though, at the entire portfolio of the city instead of necessarily building by building. And that could allow us to sidestep a lot of greenhouse gases that you kind of have an increasingly exponential increasing cost as you try to squeeze out the last couple of tons of carbon dioxide on a lot of projects. And sometimes, stopping at 98% or stopping at 90% of a solution is actually sufficient and allows you to use those dollars elsewhere.
Got it. Because that 10% last reduction probably be very, very costly.
It can be, and it totally depends on the building type, where this particular building type was sort of the worst case scenario, I think somebody had said, in terms of building types the city owns, and other building types you could probably get to 100% without as much trouble.
Got it, okay. Good. Thank you. Councillor Tang? Sorry, I'm going to stop here. Councillor Tang, we'll come back to you after the break at 3:45, okay? Thanks.
Thanks.
Taking a break, right? Oh, we didn't. I'm sorry then. Councillor Cardinal, sorry. Thank you for Councillor reminding me that. Because I just resumed regular schedule. Okay. All right. Councillor Tang, you go ahead.
I think she dropped off. I just saw her.
Okay, no worries. Then we'll carry on with Councillor Cardinal. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. I hesitated about asking this question because I don't want to be too provocative or nitpicky, but to Ms. Butterfield, has industry ever come here and said, abandon policy 627A?
No,
Has there ever been any inference that we should drop this work from industry?
no.
From anyone that, I guess you can't speak for anyone, but I mean, like, there's a bit of an undertone here that there's an argument being made for not trying to be more energy efficient. Is that the argument that your industry is trying to present?
Our members are working on becoming more energy efficient every single day.
Are there not members of your industry that are actually see a competitive market advantage by offering some of these initiatives in their product?
Many of our home builders offer net zero product, absolutely.
And they're all trying to build more efficiency all the time.
That's right.
So I'm wondering if we can drop that undertone, maybe. Maybe to the other speakers. I don't hear anybody at all saying, don't do this. What I think I hear them saying is, find the most cost-effective way to do this. Is that fair?
That's what BUILD is asking for, is to examine the trade-offs. So I think the last response was actually directly in line with what we would agree with. Look at all the options and make trade-offs where they're necessary, because we should be looking to minimize costs as well for the entire city's benefit.
So, Mr. Sandercock, do you agree with that? That that this conversation ought be more about how do we do these things in the most cost-efficient way possible?
Yes, to the degree that we're going to be looking at seriously reducing greenhouse gas emissions and trying to address the climate emergency, I would agree that you want your dollars to get the greatest degree of greenhouse gas reductions as possible. And sometimes trying to push for certain building types all the way to net zero might be some diminishing returns.
So you spoke to a bit of an 80-20 rule.
I don't know if Pareto, as a 1900s economist, is the best way to make our decisions, but in that realm. Yeah.
But if we're let's just use those for numbers. If we hit 80% of the ultimate goal of net zero with 20% of the cost, and then we start having a conversation there about trade-offs, would that be a reasonable approach?
Yeah, and I believe, yes, I would say it is, and I would say that the majority of models actually agree with you that the focus is often on the, well, gosh, that last 10% or 20% will be hard, and we get paralyzed. It'd be far better for us to move forward on the 80% we can do, and then in 10 or 20 years say, oh, now there's new technologies that we can close the last gap. Sometimes we get stalled on the last gap, but we could act today easily.
Yeah, we could do like, I'm going to stick with 80-20 because I don't have a better number.
Nice
we could do that right now, right? And so we had a conversation this morning about going out to the private sector and initiating, competitive processes that say, okay, we need a fire hall. There's a big field next door that we own. That field might be a housing development, or it might be an arena, or it might be some other thing. So maybe a fire hall discreetly is not the most efficient form of building to try to achieve these goals. But maybe if we latch 2 or 3 other buildings onto it, there might be something we can do where one building is compensating for the other.
My goodness, that would be beautiful.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Tang, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Sorry,
I'm back.
but there was confusion on my side. Sorry about that. Go ahead, please.
No, all good. Yeah, maybe just to kind of build on that thread with Jim, and I apologize, I came in, I think, in the middle of folks speaking, so I missed some of the presentation earlier. Because I am interested in what you're proposing in terms of this portfolio approach, where we're not necessarily looking at the footprint of one singular building per se, but kind of the broader holistic context of what's around it. So I just wanted to confirm what I'm hearing from you, like that interpretation is correct.
Yeah, I believe that looking at buildings and trying to get an individual building decarbonized is really valuable, but I think there is a need to identify that sometimes certain buildings are going to be very difficult to decarbonize. And then going to a portfolio approach would be good. Doing a high-level assessment across the entire portfolio, for example, would allow you to identify the buildings that would give you the quickest greenhouse gas wins. The only thing I would suggest amongst all of this is to try not to go down dead ends, where an approach that will allow us to improve a building incrementally of, say, only 10 or 20% decarbonization could actually paint us into a corner that's the last thing we ever do in that building. So there are some nuances there, but I think that a portfolio approach in general is a good idea. But I'd hate to see us going from low efficiency boilers to high efficiency condensing boilers, where the building could have been taken reasonably further, because that would paint us into a corner. Or, many homeowners are being offered, why don't we put additional new siding on the side of your house, and we can give you an extra inch or two of insulation. Well, once 1 or 2 inches of insulation goes on a homeowner's building and they slap some stucco over top of that or whatever, that building is locked in. It is never going to be improved. So I would just caution that looking out for this portfolio approach could push us into that direction, and we wouldn't want to do that. But I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think it was you who said it at the end there, where involving members of ETCRC or members of the expert community in this particular space earlier on is probably better than later, so that you can incorporate some of these tactics into developing something. Was it you that said that?
I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think earlier this morning we also sort of that point came up around whether it's involving contractors or partners earlier on, even to just share risks and whatnot is just an important thing to consider. I want to go to Mike because I think I didn't hear your full presentation, but I was really intrigued by what you were saying around the sustainable return on investment, which I think is similar to kind of what we're talking about here, where the return on not just that one building, but the community.
Yeah, it's just a way to really normalize everything down to the dollar again, but it's to expand that financial business case off the site and into the community. And I think that, with the city of Edmonton, really a city exists for the public good, but the public good is beyond just that, those expenses that are incurred as part of this project. It's about the benefits that are accrued to the community as a result of that particular project. So I think a sustainable return on investment tool can really illuminate that and just help build the case for continued support of policies like this, even if they're amended in some way to achieve it in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, when this report came out, I think, for me, I'm not interested in rescinding or pulling back, but I do wonder about our interpretation of it, how we execute it in practice, and how we calculate how we determine that return. So I appreciate all the comments from you. I guess last question to Shafraz. I think a lot of the Q&A here is focused on the climate resilience policy, but on the design committee side of things, you still think, despite what's suggested in the report, design committee still has value, right?
Yes, I do, provided it has the ability to be a little bit more forceful of what they recommend being implemented. One of the challenges I had when I was on the committee is, even though the development officer relayed our comments back, sometimes the recommendations and the conditions that were provided for building the development were not even implemented. So we struggle with actually the follow through and seeing some of them actually get frankly implemented.
Thank you, I'm out of time.
Thank you, Constantine. So that concludes the questions to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate that you waited all morning to share your input with the committee. And now we're going to go to questions to administration. And you're welcome to stay on and watch the rest of the proceeding. Councillor Salvador?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I guess to administration, we're hearing very similar similar thoughts from all of our speakers, I would say today. And my biggest question is, how do we bridge the gap between what I see as there is inherent flexibility and creativity built into the policy. There's room for that, but then the analysis in front of us does seem a lot more rigid or prescriptive in the interpretation that was brought forward. So, am I correct in understanding that flexibility is built into the policy?
Councillor Salvador, I think a few things that we need to make sure we're maybe clarifying, if I may. The case study is one interpretation of the policies, as we've noted. We could debate all of the choices of the architects and the engineers have made. The purpose was to have this discussion with committee about, we have policies, bylaws, processes, had costs, and we wanted to answer that question in the most efficient way possible. And so the consultants that did the report and the case study had about 6 weeks to design 2 facilities to schematic design. They did it. You know, they are well experienced, but they still had to do that very quickly. The back and forth process that would usually take place to suggest or articulate, you know, have we thought about this, have we thought about that, was extremely accelerated and limited to a few iterations. And so for all those reasons, I think, while we appreciate all of the comments related to it could have been done differently. Absolutely, we're 100% on the same page. What we wanted to show council was the best analysis we could do within the timeline, and also representing a facility that we will actually be building. It's not this design, but one of the reasons we chose fire stations is that right now, applying this policy, we have 3 fire stations and 1 transit garage. We are not looking to build office buildings, residential buildings, and so we do need to be very clear about what we are trying to make emissions neutral are potentially some of the most difficult buildings to do that. And so we wanted to show that to committee today.
Yeah, that's...
And just for another, sorry to interrupt you. So this wasn't to get the number exactly right. This was to focus on where we think we need to spend more time. So we filtered up relatively the policies and the influences that we think is worthy of us doing exactly what we heard some of the speakers talking about.
Yeah, and maybe looking at that next body of work, recognizing there's the lessons learned. I'm also really interested in the sustainable return on investment approach, and wondering if that is part of some of the work going forward, or if it can be part of the work going forward.
Yes, Councillor. So the policy was planned and is already under review. This report provides a little more urgency and focus on what specifically we want to look at for that policy, and much of what we heard from speakers today is going to be captured in that policy review. And we are looking at including the sustainable return on investment approach to that policy review. So that is a project that is ongoing and is going to be happening. And I can ask Director Chandra Tamaris to provide a little bit more detail of that specific piece of work, if you would appreciate that.
Sure.
So I guess the quick difference maybe between a financial return on investment and a sustainable return on investment is the sustainable return on investment is also going to look not just at the financial return, but what other external or benefits that society will achieve through these outcomes. So organizations can do sustainable return on investment differently. And we see that in practice, but what we're hoping to do is provide a similar SROI as we did when we made the first sustainable building policy. I think Mr. Ross was speaking to that, to look at the different archetypes of buildings we have. What are those societal benefits? So, you know, what's the benefit to society around having reduced air pollution associated with heating choices and things like that.
Okay, that's helpful. And really quickly, In my conception of the policy review, obviously the conversation today is one input, but there are others. This is not going to be the sole thing that is driving the recommendations that emerge from the review, correct?
That is correct. Engagement is ongoing and will continue for the next several months, and it is a broad engagement that we traditionally look to talk to many in the community about.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. Thank you for this. We've been warned against making too many inferences with the numbers by our speakers, but here goes. This is my calculation. $3.75 million for C627A over a final building cost of $21 million is 18%. And my question is, first of all, it is actually kind of back to are we actually using this policy as a guideline, as a strong recommendation, or as a very strict requirement? Because if I take that 18% and apply it to, the building cost at Lewis Farms, which is I think roughly $250 million, give or take, that's a $45 million increase just for 627A. And I'm not suggesting that's necessarily even a bad thing. It's just that we didn't know when we talked about that project.
Okay, so a couple of things here. So the case study is we looked at implementing the policy. And so some of the speakers have mentioned that there is an exception clause in the procedure, and we didn't feel like that would provide the right information for committee to understand the cost drivers if we started to apply the exception clause to this. And so from that perspective, it could be conceived as a worst case scenario. What we want to make sure that we're not suggesting that this becomes a percentage, and which is why we did not refer to any percentages in the report, because archetypes will vary, and so representing the additional cost on a rec center using a fire station is already problematic.
Right.
And so those are all things that we struggle with when it comes to associating costs with this particular policy. At the time of its approval, I believe we had used 6 to 15%, if my memory serves me right. And that was above our previous policy, which was already pretty ambitious. And so from all that perspective, what we brought forward to council or to committee today, we feel is representative of what we're seeing in the field and what we had kind of anticipated, especially for those hard archetypes. Now, to your question, would we apply that to a design? It's so hard to say because fundamentally designing a facility to be emissions neutral starts from the very beginning, and you don't add elements to it. You really think about its orientation, if you're going to do geothermal, if you're going to look at windows, there's so many things that maybe Lewis Farms would never look like it looks now, right?
Is there a way to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I checked with the team, and even when we were designing Lewis, it went through many rounds. We didn't have this policy. It was an older version of the policy, which had different parameters, as an example.
And I
so
don't want to raise that,
No, it's all good, just for context.
I don't want to raise that alarm. Fair enough. I appreciate that. I'm going to have a couple rounds anyway. But a fire hall is not a rec center, totally. And I get that we don't necessarily want to be designing 3 or 4 buildings every time we build a building. Is there a middle ground here? Is there a place where we say, okay, we're gonna build a building. We're gonna be reasonably efficient about it, right? We're gonna have a building envelope that is efficient, perhaps even more efficient than level 1 of the model energy code. We're going to make sure that these are efficient. We're going to use triple cleaned, that kind of thing. But we can design a rudimentary conventional design at a point in the process, and then design the incremental designs beyond that. So we're going to design a building that's going to have rooftops. but we know that we can have an alternative design that runs geothermal through a hot water circulation system. We know that we could do a full solar heat system, and using nothing more than panels. How hard would that be to give us a reasonable table of this is what the building more or less would cost if we're being reasonably proactive about it, and this is what it would cost to layer on a couple of these other things, and I've run out of time.
You noted the question. Maybe Councillor Cartmel is going to come for the next round, so you can answer that. I'll go next. So, how have we built any building based on the implementation of C627?
The first one is under construction right now. It's the Blatchford Fire Station.
So that's the only one that where this policy was applicable from
It's the
planning to whatever construction, right?
It's the first one, and then we have 3 others that are in design. So Walker and Wellington fire stations are in design, and the Southeast Transit Garage is in design as well.
Got it. Because I think I agree with Councillor Cartmel that we should not be ringing alarm bells because we haven't spent 18% on every building. Other buildings that we have built in the past were not built to these standards, right? And so not previous buildings we have built, they have not cost us 18% more or whatever that difference is.
The only other one to mention is Windermere Fire Station, which was a case study. So we built it net zero, and so we did have learnings from that facility as well.
Yeah. Okay. This would be the future in looking costs, right?
That's correct. Yeah, right. It's future focused. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to focus on those top 4 you identified. One is C27, then the other one is Fire Rescue Service Delivery Policy C523A. But those are the standards we want to build to because of what is the intent of those standards? Why are they applicable? They are related to safety. What are those?
So I'll let David help on this one, but from a fire rescue service delivery policy, it's really meant about how does fire meet their operational efficiencies as well as some national standards. David can explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, a functional design committee was struck to identify what the features were required in a fire station. So that drives some of the cost. And making sure we meet our standards and so forth. So it's been in place a number of years. Many fire departments don't have such a thing. You can interpret that positively.
But we have those for a reason, right? We have those for a reason,
and when we're designing future fire stations, it makes our
we're not looking at in any way reducing those standards, right?
We are.
You are?
In certain aspects, we're recognising the financial realities of the city, and we're questioning our needs in terms of fire stations. I think the deliberation back in the day was, what would we like? I think the conversation now is, what do we need? And, recognising we're trying to build fire stations to match growth, but we're recognising the financial challenges that we face. And so we're trying to come to the table and contribute to solutions.
So maybe let me ask this question different way then. I just want to make sure that the intent of Fire Rescue Service Delivery Policy 523A, there might be flexibility within the policy, but the intent is not compromised, right?
The intent remains. The content of it may change.
Okay, got it. I think it's okay. That's good clarity. That may reduce the cost, or depending on that. And can you talk more about City of Edmonton facility construction standards? What do they achieve? Why are they there? And why do they drive the cost?
So I think the easiest way for committee to understand is that it's the equivalent of complete streets, but for buildings. And so it's telling our consultants that design our facilities how we want to operate, maintain, and what our requirements are related to that.
Like accessibility standards, right?
It would be more related to maintainability standards, needing to be able to access HVAC equipment in a safe way to do filter changes every so often, ensuring that when there are solar panels installed, that our facility maintenance team can access them in a safe way. The standards are really about both safety, maintainability, operational requirements. There are also things like we have a single security system that is used across all of our facilities or our building management systems. And so those are prescribed, and we want to see our buildings added to them, which means that we are very specific about some of those requirements. It is a highly technical document, and it's really meant to support the designers of our facilities to achieve the best outcome.
Okay, I'll come back because I need to follow up on that, because what I want to understand is that are those kind of mandatory required things that we must do, or are they discretionary? Well, then if they're discretionary, why a cost has it been identified as a potential? Okay, good. Councillor Rutherford, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to focus on the fire halls and Chief Lazenby kind of comment, because I think that's the tension that I'm feeling, and I understand the sustainability return on investment writ large on public assets. But there is a tension I feel with fire halls specifically, in that, we have prioritized safety as one of our growth criterias, and we know that with the growth we've experienced, we need more fire halls. So I'm of the mindset that if we can build 2 fire halls or 3 fire halls by reducing the cost of each of those fire halls instead of only having 2, that's worth it. So I just wanted to understand, I understand that these policies are getting reviewed. I understand the value in always weighing the public good and all of those pieces, but the public good for having fire service coverage is also a public good we need to be discussing. So how is if this is received for information and those processes are followed in terms of those policy reviews, what can we expect to see differently in terms of getting more fire halls built?
I can start, and I'll see if David can add. So when it comes to the fire rescue delivery policy, our main goal is to review the functional program. And so as David mentioned, we had completed a typical functional program to inform all of our fire stations moving forward. I think it was 2017, would start with that information. And so instead of starting from scratch every time, we have the information, we know what is required. And so since we've built a few fire halls since then, our teams, so EFRS and IIS, have started the process to review that functional program and say, as David was saying, what was included as could versus what should be there. And the learnings from fire have also been, they've been operating in some of those fire stations for many years, and so we can really dig into that. The reality is that the footprint of our fire stations will remain very similar. We have crews of a certain size, they have certain needs, and we're looking for efficiencies, but they are, I don't want to say minor, but they will not lead to necessarily the cost efficiencies that we're talking about. But some of the bigger ones, could include things like the number of bays, which does have a cost difference, and the need for drive-through fire stations, for example. And so all of those are being reviewed to understand operational efficiencies versus capital costs.
Sorry, I was just going to add, Councillor, that I don't think we should look at it for this review that Pascal talked about. It's not going to be of the scale of a 2-for-1 or that level. It'll be incremental reductions, which does free up some, but that's the scope of the work.
And I have a little bit more sense of urgency. I think the fire halls, they're talking about what is needed in 2017. We know we need more fire halls yesterday than we even have in our capital budget right now. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And there are some areas of the city in which people's insurances are higher, affecting affordability, and the response times are not equal across the entirety of the city. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
So I understand this. We want to find a few efficiencies there, And I get that with some of the other projects like a rec center or library or those things that aren't about fundamental safety and security of the residents that we serve. So this is where I'm like, I'm really feeling a tension because I want to achieve those goals, but I'm not sure, like if I look at this report, honestly, if we just said that all fire halls are exempt from the environmental policy, could we not build more fire halls? I'm not saying I want to do it, but I'm just saying when, like, based on what I read, that seems to be the easiest and most efficient way to get us more fire halls.
I think that's a bit of a, not a complex question, but you just heard from speakers today, and even in our assumptions on this assessment, that there's an upward amount of an up to from one analysis on the fire halls, councillor. So it's not necessarily going to achieve that just by exempting that fully. I think the idea is to explore and bring those costs down while still trying to achieve intent of the policies to try and do more collectively.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. So I left you with a big question there.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe go ahead.
Okay.
If you have a thought.
So just for everyone, so question was, could we explore multiple designs ahead of making a decision to move forward with one specific level of sustainability, let's say, for the design? It would certainly require a bit more time and resources in planning and design. I think over time, it's something that may become less and less necessary as we understand better and we work with industry to really grow our skill set, but the skill sets of industry to provide that. But it is feasible, and but it would be understanding to what level of detail. And so, when would the decision be made? Things like that would have a biggest influence. The earliest we make it in the process, the less resource intensive it would be.
Yeah, it's finding that same balance that we already have right in the PDDM model about enough detail to provide some idea of the cost, but not so much detail that we're not backing up the design process.
And so accepting that the level of accuracy would be imperfect and that we would be making decisions on assumptions with a certain level of information that could change when the design is actually progressed through. Right?
Is it too late for the fire stations that are in progress?
Well, I would suggest that we've been doing a lot of that work in the fire stations that have been in progress, and so the value engineering kind of process that we go through, the iterative process that we go through with our consultants, have really been based on how do we ensure that we have the best value for money and for these builds. And I'll give you just a few more examples. Some of our standards have, and over time, have required us to put generators indoors for ease of maintainability, avoiding vandalism, things like that. And so we've already moved away from that and say, okay, well, we will put the generators outdoor for those 2 fire stations to really progress through and get towards budget. And so we are doing that work with our consultants as we go.
Okay, so I had a question about that, so I'm glad you mentioned that. So would it be possible then, given that you're already down the road and don't want to pause and delay, is it possible to bring an analysis similar to this on those actual projects? And the reason I have a bit of a fixation on this one is because this is the actual kind of building that we are off-site levying to developers. And so, this has implications for other people. This is not just a city cost thing.
The only caution I would say, of course, it's possible. Yeah. As Councillor Rutherford has mentioned, these are projects that are seen as priorities, and so we would want to make sure not to distract our project team and our consultants with that analysis, and so it could be done further into the process.
Yeah, that's not my intent. I don't want to take anybody off their mission, right? The critical path here is to get these things built. If they're already contracted and going, finish them. Mm-hmm. But bringing that back, that analysis would further inform this conversation.
We could absolutely do that, yes.
Is there other, I think I already asked that. These are the buildings that we anticipate building over the next few years.
I just asking, we're planning to bring them forward in the fall for our approval to proceed with delivery. that checkpoint 3, that's standalone, if I have that
Could
right.
you, could you have that analysis then for that?
We'll see what we can do to bring
That's
extra
where I would
information.
suggest no, just because that would distract the team from completing the design. But potentially, once that step has been completed, then we could see with the resources available if that could be done.
But I guess to Pascal's point, we will bring back as part of that kind of some of the things that are within the scope of it that she just verbally talked about to give you a sense compared to what you're seeing today.
Yeah, okay. So I think, I wonder about having everything inside purely from a comfort perspective, and again, if that's worth the cost. I get the building management systems. We want central control over lights and alarms and things like that. That makes sense. Design committee. These are fire halls. Why aren't they prototype buildings? Why aren't we designing one and building 4?
So we are doing that right now. As you may remember, it was a motion from Mayor Sohi. And so Wellington and Walker are being done as a single design, adapted to each site, of course, because they are not laid out exactly the same way.
Right.
And so we are testing that out to see if it does yield efficiencies or productivity. Yeah.
Good, a great answer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Councillor Tang.
Well, that was one of my questions. So so essentially we haven't quite taken that approach in the past. We've just been kind of doing them one off, and now with these 2 fire stations, we will be seeing kind of the cost efficiency analysis of that. Right. So this is a kind of a new direction you're taking.
Yeah, so it was provided by council at the onset of the budget, and so we're moving forward with a single design for the 2 sites.
And I mean, because I think earlier with one of the speakers, we talked about that portfolio approach, and what if it's like not just one fire station, if you kind of add on some of the other pieces. And Walker was one of the examples where we were gonna do that, but one of the decision point was that with supportive housing, and never mind some of the challenging conversations in the community, but the decision point was actually the cost, especially on the housing side, that it didn't generate any of the cost efficiency. But I guess at that time you weren't necessarily looking at like the sustainable return on investment on a project like that, co-location versus standalone. Because this conversation is making me think about, now we all want to have that. We had the opportunity, but at that time, it didn't really demonstrate the cost efficiency, right?
That's correct. There was a cost efficiency and also the issue around timing of funding from the affordability. For the affordable housing.
Right, and I think when we put forward those proposals, we didn't really look at like, okay, how am I adding affordable housing contribute to the carbon footprint or the climate resilience of this overall project? Do you know what I mean? Like, because maybe we just didn't get far enough down that path to look at that analysis.
That's correct. We didn't analyze it from that perspective. The only thing I would share is that from other municipalities, what we know is that the efficiency in combining types of facilities really comes to a sustainable land use versus necessarily like cost efficiencies.
Gotcha. Well, that must factor into the SROI analysis as well. Okay, that's really helpful. And then I was wondering about, I think there's some comments related to technology. As technology improve, it might potentially help us realize some of that saving. Have we seen that over the years with other projects?
I can start and look to Daryl, maybe if you want to speak a little bit to that, but I would say that absolutely, like, technology is ever evolving on the facility side. The facilities are becoming more and more complex, but they are benefiting from higher performance, higher efficiency equipment, but also innovative ways to heat or cool buildings. But maybe Daryl, if you want to speak a bit.
Our design standards, we're constantly evolving them. I think, as we mentioned in the.
Can you?
Sorry.
Can you speak up?
I can hear.
Oh,
I know.
is my mic on?
Yes. The rain. There's a lot of noise from the
Sorry
rain
about
here,
that.
though. Good.
Yeah, I think as we mentioned in the presentation, we're constantly evolving our design and construction standards and looking for these additional efficiencies in our buildings.
Okay. Yeah, and then just Pascal, back to what you're saying, like when we talk about co-location, it's really about the sustainable land use rather than perhaps like the actual carbon reduction, et cetera. I'm also wondering, because right now we're talking a lot about buildings. Oh, wow, it's hailing. Speaking of climate resilience, it's hailing right now. Sorry, because we're talking a lot about buildings, but like when we consider our overall, like when we take that, whether it's portfolio approach or a comprehensive analysis that we're thinking about, are we also thinking about service? You know, like greater investment in transit at the site will also help with sustainability, for example.
I'll start and then I'll get Kent to chime in. For the, like in respect to the climate resilience policy, it's really specific about the building itself and so the criterias and objectives. But it is part of that global energy transition strategy, which does account for a lot of that. And so I don't know if Kent wants to weigh in.
I'm also out of time. That's okay. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of my questions have been answered, but just around the exemption route. So where is the line or threshold for pursuing an exemption? I'm just trying to understand what that looks like in practice.
So right now, the way the procedure is written, it says in highly exceptional circumstances and as a last resort, an exception will be granted. And so given that language, I would say we have a bar set very high about when we would pursue an exception to the climate resilience policy at this point in time. So far, Blatchford has not needed an exception, but it does benefit from the district energy at Blatchford, which does make it the path to emission neutral easier. Walker and Wellington, we are achieving the outcomes of the policy without an exception. And right now we are reviewing the Southeast Transit Garage, which may require that consideration given some of the challenges with that particular building.
Okay, so hearing that, yeah, the bar is high, but in those cases where it's unreasonable, I guess, to continue pushing beyond, that route is there.
That route is there, and that's the challenge that I think we and that we recognize is clarifying what does that unreasonable mean. It's part of some of the work that we want to do at UPE to look at based on our experiences. How do we want to express that in the review of the policy?
If I could as well, we do fully support that the policy revision offer more clarity and be much more definitive in terms of those trade-offs and looking at the building and the site and how it can all work together and what is the best value for the investment. So we do believe on the policy side that more clarity and explanation is needed through the policy.
Great. And I believe you mentioned this before, but those types of decisions around greater clarity, what is reasonable for an exemption, what is not, will all be informed by discussions with folks around the ETCRC table, other stakeholders, industry folks, correct?
The development of the policy, yes, and once the city takes that and is utilizing it, and then that is a different process, but yes, correct. To develop the policy, yes.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So coming back to my original initial question at the end of my 5 minutes, those City of Edmonton facility construction standards, what is discretionary, what is mandatory?
I would say, and I'll look for Arjun to support here, it's generally discretionary because it is they represent our requirements to ensure that above and beyond code, of course, because like everything will be designed per code, and so our standards go above, beyond that, maybe with some exception around like fire alarm, security, some of the centralization that we do at city level. The rest would be, discretionary. So, for example, we prescribe putting as maximum equipment within the building as possible and avoid rooftop units. There are multiple reasons for that. One of them is safety and operational concerns related to their maintenance. One other is to maximize rooftop capacity for solar panels. And so it does serve multiple purpose.
Got it. Okay, that gave me a little bit of sense. Okay. Design committee, absolutely. I understand whether, I know we'll see what happens with those two fire halls and how many savings are there. So if I understood correctly, your answer to Councillor Salvador, the Blatchford and those two fire halls don't require exemption, right, to the policy because you're able to achieve that within the budget. Is there maybe the 20% things we were talking about, the hardest to achieve to get to net zero, right? Are those challenges are not there for these fire stations, three of these fire stations?
No, they are absolutely there for sure. And,
but are they going to be very, very costly to achieve? Wouldn't be better off to get exemption to reduce that cost? And as we heard from some of the speakers.
Let me see if Daryl or Sean could speak to that.
The fire stations as I stand right now are in design. We're looking at doing a life cycle cost analysis on those two fire stations based around some of the results of this study, and based on the output of that life cycle cost analysis, we will make decisions around whether there should be an exemption or not. One of the requirements of the exemption, which is considered a last resort, is it has to be justified by a life cycle cost analysis. So we have to do that work first before we can apply for exemption.
So these two fire halls in suburban communities, like if they're being funded by the levy imposed on developers, wouldn't be engaging with them to see what those cost drivers are to reduce the cost?
So we had discussions with BUILD to provide this report, and they do get updates on the projects as we move forward.
But are they, like, who's paying for the cost of these two fire halls?
Well, inevitably, I don't believe that there is a levy for the Wellington fire station since it is in a developed area.
How about Walker?
Walker does fall in the off-site levy. And in general, I believe the developers will provide about 40% of the cost.
So they're not 100% funded by?
They do not fund 100% of the fire stations, no.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so it's going to cover the portion. Okay. On the southeast garage, is sustainability standards, zero emission buildings, conditional of federal funding on their garage?
It is.
Oh, I see. So we
have to take that into consideration as we look at how we apply our standards and our policy to meet our grant funding requirements.
Okay. Okay, got it. Okay. Thanks.
I'm guessing rainbow.
Was everything okay? Oh, good.
Yeah. They were just taking some photos behind you. So, okay, so that triggered just a couple of questions for me. First of all, those fire halls might not be developer supported, but the cost of those fire halls helps determine the off-site levy value that they're being charged, right?
So the Walker Fire Station is one of the off-site levy fire stations.
Right.
And so they are being charged an off-site levy per hectare fee at the time of subdivision for their proportional cost to build the ultimate fire station, or the total cost of the fire station.
To what budget?
To the budget that we work with industry on. There's committees that look at the cost of the fire stations and come to an agreement, but it is with the city and industry working on those. But it is city-led, determining the budget of each of those fire stations.
We've heard a lot today about how that budget might be too high and out of date. So I just don't want to lose this in the thought that because it's at Blatchford, it doesn't matter. It does matter because it impacts how we calculate the total cost of a fire hall.
The only thing I wanted to clarify around that is that the offsite levy does include more than the construction of the fire station.
Well, that's its own thing. Yeah.
It includes land and one pumper truck. And
Yeah.
so from that perspective, we cannot take the 21 million that is cited in this case study to compare it to the 26 million.
No,
that
I know,
believe
there's
we
ads,
used. Right.
there's ads between 21 and 26, which is also a bone of contention, but not for today. The answer over here twigged something with me. What I heard was the only way we can exempt a fire hall is if we apply on a life cycle basis. Did I hear that correctly? Apply to who?
So the way the C637 policy is managed is there's a team, there's a group of internal city folks that helps watch over the C637 from different departments. And one of the first steps is having that life cycle cost analysis go back to that team. And then if it's still good and they still want the exception, it goes to the deputy city manager of the appropriate group for that facility.
Okay, so I asked a long time ago about, are these guidelines or are they prescriptive? That sounds really, really, really prescriptive. And it sounds, quite frankly, pretty siloed. Like if we decide it's not worth it on this fire hall because reasons, there should not be all of that very prescriptive apparatus to decide as a city, one part of the city reporting to the other part of the city to say, this is not the right place to push that policy through.
Well, the sustainability, sorry, I can't remember the name of that team,
Yeah.
is made up of people from IIS, but also from UPE. And so it's important because that's also a feedback loop around, is the policy meeting its intent, and is its application meeting the intent of the policy? And so that's why there's that kind of consulting team. And also because the policy goes beyond new construction, it goes into renewal, it talks about operations. There are people from development services talking about safety codes and, from a code perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a very collaborative approach. And I would say, yes, the policy is prescriptive, like the procedure is prescriptive. It is thou shalt do. And we all work together in administration to the best that we can within that framework. Right? It is a collaborative approach while it does have accountability attached to it.
Okay, that seems contrary to the conversation we've had here. We talked about, my words, 80-20 rule. It's policy, not prescriptive, not law. It's, what are the right choices to be made. But now I'm hearing it is thou shalt, and you've got to hit these targets no matter what. And there's a very involved process to not. This sounds very
It's fair.
contradictory.
I'm looking at Kent too, because you're right. We talked about the move forward, and what you're just hearing about is existing processes to date with the policy. Kent talked about updates coming through the policy, and Kent, I don't know if you want to speak more to what that looks like.
If I could just point out that this report has been helpful in identifying some of those issues that you're flagging right now. And so that is absolutely in our core piece of work to clean that up, to make sure that it is not too prescriptive, that everybody is understanding about what is that value trade-off for investment. So that is definitely what we're looking at with this review.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I heard that kind of contradictory understanding of the policy as well, right? For some it's flexible, for some seems like prescriptive, right? So I think a common understanding will be helpful, or maybe the motion I'm going to make might help with that too, right? So I maybe have that conversation. So I'm going to move a motion that administration provide a memo to council providing an update on the next steps identified, including lessons learned as part of reviewing the city policies, bylaws, standards, and processes identified as cost drivers in attachment 4 of the June 25th, 2025 Infrastructure Services Report ISO 2537 Cost Benefit Analysis and Cost Drivers on Comparative Capital Projects Report, with the aim to reduce construction and operating costs of new facilities. And part 2, that administration prepare amendments to council's climate resilience policy C627A that includes part 1, a sustainable return on investment analysis validation with the thresholds before proceeding with climate resilience design decisions, and part 2, that the opportunity to explore options for cost reductions that still meet the intent of the emissions neutral policy intent, right? I think just to quickly introduce this, it's just exactly the conversation we had to follow up on this report and really look at the things we discussed about discretionary and mandatory different interpretations, but the intent remains that we want to build buildings that are climate resilient and sustainable, and the life cycle cost analysis, right? So I think it gives administration more work, more next steps to follow up on this analysis. Yeah. Okay.
I just want to let you know we have reversed the order of those two parts because it does make sense for you to give an indication on the policy amendments before we ask for a memo that are somewhat predicated on the policy amendments.
Yes, do the part 2 becomes part 1 and part 1 becomes part 2. Okay. Councillor Rutherford, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was on the board before this motion, so I can still just ask broader questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Whether this motion is on the floor or not, I guess I just wanted to get some reassurance from administration that we are going to have some of this squared away before the next 4-year budget debate. Is that the timeline? What is the timeline for some of this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Rutherford. Especially like on the lessons learned, we are implementing them for active projects. We will be reviewing the fire station functional program over this year, and we will be working with our colleagues in UPE to review the climate resilience policy before the end of 2026 in advance of the next budget cycle.
Yeah, and so while I'm not on committee, I guess another question is, what is needed to, or is there a conversation needed to make sure that we are truly matching the fire service infrastructure with the need across our city?
We're planning to bring in the next budget cycle the state of play in terms of where we are from a response time perspective and where we see the gaps in the city as part of the next 4-year budget cycle. So we'll be sharing our story then.
Okay, you'll be sharing, sorry, just 1 second, Pascal.
Yeah.
So you'll be sharing that story so that when the 4-year budget, the next 4-year, the 2027 to 2030 budget is debated, the real sort of state of where we are and where we need to be will be clearly laid out. That's what I want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Pascal, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide you, also, we want to work with both EFRS, EPS, and community services. They all have needs in, like outside of the Henday loop, and so we want to see what opportunities there might be for co-location as well, and so that could drive some efficiencies related to investment that serve the purpose of fire, but also police and community standards.
Just one more point on that as well, if I may. We're very mindful that when we look at the development of the city, in the city plan, the northeast section, north of the Henday, minimal development right now, but if we don't build fire stations within 10 minutes of that development, there are additional construction costs incurred that ultimately land on the residents, to the tune, pre-COVID, $10–15 million per neighbourhood, as well as additional insurance costs. So, the development is ahead of us in terms of the south of the city, but we want to take those lessons learned and try and get ahead of such issues for the northeast of the city. So that'll be part of the story that we tell in the next budget cycle.
Yeah, and this is why I kind of, I do agree with Councillor Carmel and the speakers that spoke from Build too. I do think the fire halls are a little bit of a different beast than other things. While some of them are not necessarily funded through that levy, I do think there's an interplay there that needs to be teased out a bit more, for sure. I guess we've talked a lot about the budget and all of those things, but I just want to make sure too, I want to get reassurance today that some of this design work with some of these policies is also not adding time, because again, I'm only going from the experience I have with the Wellington Fire Station, but when we debated it at the 4-year budget, it was supposed to be operational before the end of this 4-year budget cycle, and it hasn't even had planning and design done.
Councillor Rutherford, like in all honesty, of course, these debates have influence on our timelines. We're trying to bring forward the best project possible, using the lessons learned, using also wanting to hear the direction from committee and council as to what is expected. But we are doing our best to ensure that we are moving forward now that the location of Wellington Fire Station was confirmed. Since that point, we've been moving forward with the design, but we are in the midst of value engineering and life cycle analysis with the objective of bringing these projects to council for funding in fall SCBA.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and thank you to the mayor for this motion. I don't have any comments on the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, very briefly, just want to make sure my understanding of the intent is clear. So to the mover, this is not about compromising or scaling back outcomes. It's about optimizing the best way to achieve them.
Absolutely. I think, giving that flexibility and the intent, absolutely. The climate crisis is not going away, right? So, and we want to design buildings that do achieve our climate goals. So intent is not to walk away from those outcomes.
Great, yeah, and obviously administration, that's your understanding as well. It's really about optimizing the best way to achieve those outcomes.
Yeah, agreed. Point 1B basically says that we're to follow the intent of the policy, so it's written in there. Yeah. So yes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salvador. We have a motion on the floor, and we got about 28 minutes. Don't have to take all 28 minutes. Anyone to speak? Councillor Carmel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this discussion today. I will confess I was surprised at how forthright the report was. I don't mean to cast aspersions, but I'm glad it had real numbers in there. And I really appreciate that, because it allows for a real conversation. I think it is really, really important that we continue on this path to achieve these goals. When we talk about the climate change goals and our ecological responsibilities, I have questions about some of the other policies that are layering on. We'll continue to talk about that. And I really want to say again that I have not heard anywhere in these conversations anyone at all say stop the work and forget about climate change or environmental responsibility or energy conservation. I have not heard that. And yet it seems that when we have a conversation where questions are asked, legitimate questions are asked about costs, about trade-offs, that there are some that come here and imply that people are trying to kill a policy. That is not true. And it becomes a distraction to the conversation. And I really want people to take that to heart. We're trying to make it better. And when we're challenged by those external to this process that are attaching agendas or attaching motivations or these kinds of things, it makes it harder to do the work. It becomes a polarizing thing. That's not what's happening here. And there is trade-offs. I'm reminded of my own effort to put solar panels on my roof. I am reasonably sure that I am the only one on council, and maybe one of the few people in this room, that lives in a house with solar panels on it. And when I go through the energy audit that I was compelled to do to go down that road, and the trade-offs that were implied there was choices to be made. If I had made all the choices, it would have cost me well over $100,000. And when I break it down into the various components, the return period on replacing my windows was 250 years. But the return period on putting solar panels on the roof was 13. And now when I track the costs, it's trending to 9. And being able to make those decisions, to understand that I could get a solid way towards my personal goals with a fraction of the investment was something that was informative and that I needed to know. And I think that we need to be able to make those same determinations at this table and actually prove to people that we are chasing these goals in a responsible, methodical, cost-effective way. And that sometimes chasing the last 3 points is going to cost 70% of the cost, and it's not worth doing. So I hope that this report is the beginning of that conversation, and not this conversation that seems to be, I don't know, compulsed by the idea that we're trying to kill something that we're actually trying to support. Really want people to take that to heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cardmel. Councillor Salvador, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate the discussion today and the work that went into this report. Also, really appreciate all the speakers who came out. You know, I feel differently. I think that there was really good alignment across the board. And I didn't sense any sort of undertones or suggestions that that were contrary to that. I think there's very clear alignment that we all recognize our responsibility to take climate action, and that's reflected in our policies. What I found helpful about today's discussion is that our policy is sound, our procedures are sound, and it's about finding the best path forward to optimize how we achieve the results that are expected of us in those policies. When I think about the largest drivers of our emissions, we know that buildings are an incredibly large part of that. So again, my expectation with this work, and I really appreciate the motion on the floor because I think it's reflective of this, is that we're not compromising on outcomes, we're finding the best way to achieve them. So really appreciate the motion on the floor. Appreciate that we were able to have this dialogue today, and thank you to the Mayor for putting this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. I also want to take a moment to thank all the speakers who waited all morning to participate and share their views, and their input was absolutely important for us to hear and consider and learn from. I also want to acknowledge that we have some folks from our frontline fire service, the members they represent, watching this conversation around fire halls and service and how we deliver those services and the need of enhancing those services in our neighborhoods, because they have a vested important interest in this conversation. So I'm glad that they're here to listen to this conversation. I think it's also important, like, we created this committee to have these kind of thoughtful, comprehensive conversations about how we deliver infrastructure, how we build infrastructure. I think one thing that got reinforced part of this conversation for me is that we also need to think about how do we optimize the infrastructure that we already have, right? And how do we build around that infrastructure to accommodate more growth within those neighborhoods, those communities that we don't have, our intent should be to build less of new and maintain and optimize what we already have. In cases where we have to build them to the standards as well as with the flexibility. I think another takeaway for me of this conversation, and this is not a criticism, please do not take it that way, I did notice some inconsistency of understanding of our policies among our staff, right, administration. I think it'll be helpful to have that conversation about having a consistent approach to interpreting these policies, because some see them as very prescriptive, some see them as flexible. So look forward to that conversation. And finally, I do want to thank administration for presenting this information to us. Even though these are not real numbers in cost-wise, because they're hypothetical situations, but I think they do give us an indication how policies can add on to the cost. And final is that absolutely, we cannot lose the intent of these policies. They are there for a good reason, whether they are about climate resiliency, whether they are there about the safety and protection and the creating right conditions for our frontline folks to provide those quality services that people rely on. Yeah, thank you. Okay, with that, I will take, so I'll call the vote.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. We have all the votes.
Okay, that is carried.
So, could you deal with item 3.3 as well, just to receive for information?
Okay. 3.3, Councillor. Okay. 3.3.
I also need the wording, apologies. I'll move that the June 25th, 2025 Integrated Infrastructure Services Report, IIS 02538, be received for information.
Okay, please vote.
Councillor Jans, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm a yes.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. So 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, 3-4. No private reports. No motions pending. We are adjourned.